go for it. Okay. All right, Jill, I have unmuted you. So are you there?
We are here.
All right, so get started whenever you're ready.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Jill Whitfill. I'm the library director here at Bethel.
And I'm Suzanne Roberts. I'm the assistant library director at Bethel.
And we're going to show you how to go from a concrete block building into a more modern looking 21st century landscape. The Burroughs Learning Center was constructed in 1967 as the campus showpiece. But by the dawn of the 21st century, it was feeling old, dated, and used. Students, more often than not, referred to it as the cave. It really wasn't equipped to cope with the way students study in this day and age. Then the university applied for and received a grant to turn the building into a FEMA safe room, capable of housing 1,800 people in the event of a tornado. Finally, the library staff saw a way to get some much-needed improvement made. This then is the story of the library's transformation from the cave to a mostly modern 21st century library.
When the Burroughs Learning Center was originally built in 1967, it was a great building that met the research needs of the students at that time. They had a place to get books and to study. The building was 30,000 square feet and was named after Curtis Raymond Burroughs, a former university academic dean and president. The library collection was housed on both the main floors of the building, and a portion of the collection was in the basement. This shows what the library looked like before the renovation. Notice the sleek and geometric design of the building, which I'm sure seemed very appealing in the late 1960s. However, the building did kind of stick out, surrounded by a campus full of traditional red and brick academic buildings. This floor plan shows how the library was arranged at that time. The upstairs housed the main collection of the library, along with a few small study rooms, the circulation desk, library offices, and a few computer workstations. The basement had study rooms, faculty offices, the bound periodicals, the juvenile collection, a seldom used art project room, and the heritage room, which acted as a sort of archives. The area where the juvenile collection was located had been painted to resemble a castle, complete with murals, and we cried when we had to dismantle this. The area adjacent to the offices had done duty as a computer room where the first mainframe computer came to campus.
When Kelly and I came to Bethel in 2007, the inside of the building was looking extremely dated. Can you see the darker patches in the carpet where furniture had stayed in one place for a long period of time? Who knew that the carpet was originally navy blue? And don't you just love the colors, like that avocado chair in the foreground? We also had shades of harvest gold, pumpkin, tomato, turquoise, and black.
In the early part of the 20th century, there were only a few computers to be found. In the 2008-2009 fiscal year, additional computers and a few computer tables were purchased. The photo on the right shows a view from the circulation desk out across the library.
Seems kind of dark and dim at this point.
And you can see here the seating was a mismatch of odds and ends. But boy howdy, those students loved the brown sectional in this photo. They still complain because we don't have it anymore. And the tile around the stacks that you see in the other picture on the right was very old and brittle. You could literally hear it cracking as you walked on it.
Here's the basement as it appeared when I arrived. The top left photo is the original juvenile area with its colorful murals and castle-like feel. The other photos show the shelves for bound journals and the study tables. In the background of the right photo, you can see the windows to the education resource room that was eventually turned into a conference room. To its left, behind the shelves, was the heritage room. Now, this room had originally been planned to house important items to either Bethel's history or the Cumberland Presbyterian Church. But by the time I got here, it had become a repository for basically things nobody knew what to do with, like a large stuffed doll with only one leg, a broken Christmas tree, broken furniture, and books. Lots and lots of books, whose really only claim to fame was that they were old. Some of them were very old, dating back to the early 1800s, but they really weren't of anything that had any intrinsic value. In 2010, with the help of the development office, we were able to put new flooring and furniture in the entry to create a more inviting appearance down in this lower left-hand corner. The three photos around it show how we repurposed the old juvenile area into just a basic study area for the kids, for the students. We installed security gates and put down new carpeting for the first time in over 25 years. But that wasn't nearly enough to help the library fulfill the needs of today's students.
By 2010, it became apparent that the library needed some major work. The soffit around the ceiling was coming off, the lights were exploding, and the roof leaked anytime that it rained. Several other buildings on campus had recently been renovated, so there wasn't very much money for the library. Bethel's Vice President of Strategic Planning began searching for outside sources of funding for the renovation, although the library staff didn't know this at the time. We first became aware that grant money might be awarded from FEMA in August 2011. At the university's request, architects worked on a set of dream plans that the university wanted. These original plans called for expanding the building so that it would include a cafe and university administrative offices, all on the first floor, and also included utilizing part of the current library for additional classrooms. While the library staff appreciated that there was a need for additional classrooms, giving up space was not met with any enthusiasm. Fortunately, those particular plans never made it off the drawing board. In early 2012, Bethel was awarded the grant from FEMA to convert the Burroughs Learning Center into a storm shelter. The grant awarded $3.641 million, but Bethel had to contribute $1.25 million, either in funds or work in kind. By May of 2012, architects and contractors were stopping by the library to measure and to study the building. Later that spring, the library received preliminary floor plans for the renovation, which included the FEMA required reinforcements to the walls and ceiling, the addition of storm doors, the installation of bulletproof glass, and the installation of an emergency generator. The administration was aware that we wanted some renovations for the library space as well, but those were tabled for the time being, even though that didn't stop us from wishing and planning. Although the approval process took a while, once the funds were released in the summer of 2014, things finally started to happen.
It was quite a shock when I get this phone call that we want you completely out of the building by next Monday. And this was like Tuesday of the preceding week. We had to keep timesheets carefully because these efforts counted towards Bethel's in-kind work. And that included not only the timesheets from my staff and what they were doing, I was also having to maintain timesheets for the inmates from the county jail. The library's furniture and equipment was put into several different storage locations. All the furnishings and equipment were inventoried and then tagged with where they were going. Short-term storage was left on campus in a vacant dorm room because we might need them over the coming year. Long-term storage was books and not books, but boxes and furniture that we didn't immediately need. And all of this was stored in a barn in town. And things also were tagged for VELO, for the Burroughs Center for Student Enrichment, which is where the temporary library was going to be located. We kept the books on the shelves and individually wrapped each shelf in plastic. And then these were moved in dollies to a moving van, which drove them to the new location. Fortunately, the library had recently finished a large weeding project, because we were literally moving from around 15,000 square feet to 4,000 square feet. So the decision had been made that rather than storing the books where we could get to them, we would just take all the books with us. But the new location had much less space. So because we were taking all the books, we were very limited in what else we could take. So we took the circulation desk, a few study carrels, shelving units for the 23,000 volumes book collection, some old wooden bookcases, and portable wall units that were used to make up temporary offices for me and my staff, the filing cabinets that we needed, and a few other basic necessities, and that was about it.
Okay, so this move that we're talking about from our Burroughs Learning Center to our temporary location at the Burroughs Center for Student Enrichment in one of their conference rooms, all that happened during the Christmas break of 2014. Now, no move happens without a few little hiccups here and there, and we certainly had ours. Part of the problem came from trying to get everything done in such a short time, and some of the problems came from having multiple groups involved, each one with their own idea of how to do everything that we needed to be done.
We were in tight quarters. The temporary location housed the book collection and had space for about 10 study carrels. There was a small reading area that you can see up by the front doors. We had a small space that had things like the laminator and the poster maker that students used. It also had a limited amount of space for offices. But we also had the added bonus of being next door to the campus's Chick-fil-A. So we got to enjoy the smell of fried chicken each and every day of the nearly 2 years we were there. The stacks were very close together, and you can see just how tight everything is. There wasn't a lot of room for the individual study carrels, and no place at all for groups to meet, which was probably the biggest complaint that we got from the students. This photo shows just how close together the stacks were. They definitely weren't ADA compliant. The photo on the right shows where we had tucked in our laminator and poster maker.
So even though we did move into a much smaller space, no library services were lost, even though the students and the faculty missed having their larger, more traditional library. These are some of the comments that we received from students during that time.
One of my favorites is just the, no, just no, move back. We had several that were in that vein.
Yeah, but you know, fortunately not everybody felt that way. A lot of the students were understanding of what we had to do and knew that we were doing our best to provide as many services as we could. And of course, it wasn't just the students who were affected by the move. The faculty were affected as well. They also had to adjust to the new location, and they had to kind of get used to that as well. These are some of the comments that we received from the faculty surveys. For the most part, they were supportive, and they understood that the library was doing the best that we could with our space and with the limited books and everything that we had available. Fortunately, once the library was out of the Burroughs Learning Center, the renovation can finally begin.
The building retrofit began the following January in 2015. The construction initially focused on building a new exterior that matched the surrounding buildings on campus, while also bringing construction up to FEMA standards. Unfortunately, this meant that the building lost an outside entrance to the basement, meaning students would have to come inside the library to go downstairs to their classroom. This was something of a two-edged sword. While they were bringing in more students, a lot of whom really weren't paying any attention to anything but I've got to get downstairs for class, we also had students come in who made note of what was in the library and then eventually came and actually used it for studying or to get resources. Because we were faced with essentially at the end, we had 2 years worth of classes that had never really seen a functioning library. All they'd had to deal with was the little bitty one over in the Vera Lowe Center. So it was kind of nice that, to a certain extent, that they were forced to come in through the middle of the library. Now, I realize that most of you are probably more interested in what we did on the inside, but what they did on the outside was fairly interesting as well. This whole process was to construct a FEMA safe room capable of housing 1,800 people through a Category E5 tornado, which is the worst of the worst. First, they took the clear story windows on both floors. You can see the yellow and blue across the top of the building, and removed all of those windows. And then they cut the new windows into the building, and that's what these 6 clapboard spaces are. The large space in the middle is where they tore out the original front porch. Once they finished that, they dug down around the foundation and beefed it up, as well as doing some extensive waterproofing. Next, they laid new cinder blocks all the way around the building. On the 2 sides and on the front elevation, they were up next to the building, while on the back elevation, it was about 8 feet out in order to accommodate the stairs and the loading dock and the emergency exits. Now, note the significant amount of rebar that was used within the walls. On the inside of the building, while all this was going on, they were going around, and where the 12 supporting pillars were in the basement, they were digging out the concrete around those pillars and then digging down below the foundation about 12 feet. And we'll discuss the reason for that in a moment.
So one of the next things that they did was to waterproof all the cinder blocks, and then they installed those new windows, built the new porch entrance, and then started the outside bricking. So here are photos of the front and the back of the finished structure. And as you can see, it was quite a change from the previous white stone exterior. The original brown clad pillars that were in the basement were stripped and reframed. And then 1.5-inch steel cables were placed, 1 per side, that stretched all the way from the roof through both floors and ended at the bottom of the newly dug holes in the basement. At that point, the foundation holes were filled and a new thick concrete roof was added. So all this meant that the building was now effectively tied together in one piece from the roof to below the foundation. We were told that the building would not only stand through a tornado with 200+ mile-an-hour winds, it would probably stand through a major earthquake as well. The right-hand image here that you see shows how the finished columns looked. All of this took care of most of the FEMA requirements. In addition to this, they also replaced the outdated heating and cooling system with a dual system, 1 for each floor. They replaced the ceiling tiles and installed new LED lights throughout the building. They built a new glass entrance and added additional electrical wiring. And finally, a generator was also installed that would power the building, including heating and cooling, for up to 3 days.
Now, I had sent an email to the university president and chief financial officer early in 2014, requesting permission to do some architectural changes to the building in conjunction with the anticipated FEMA grant. In July of 2015, my original plans, as you can see here on the right, were sent to the architect to see what they could do. At this point, I've got to give many, many thanks to my public services supervisor for the drawing and redrawing of these plans using Excel. She has the most amazing ability to think in multiple dimensions, and we never would have been able to do this without her help. The architect did a good job in converting our dreams into an executable drawing. Ultimately, some additional changes were made to the study room and office configuration along the back wall, and we ended up with 4 group study rooms that seat from 6 to 12 people and 2 staff offices. The back room along the left was divided into 2, and we were promised new paint and carpet. Now, as I said earlier, the loss of the front outside stairs meant that the building lost its access to the basement. So more students would have to come inside the library to go downstairs to their classrooms. In order to mitigate the amount of noise this would create, a wall was built between two of the pillars to separate the staircase from the circulation desk area. The architect had the idea to add a display case to the wall. And this has allowed us to see through the wall to the rest of the library, as well as giving us space for book displays, student art, etc. And you can see the central staircase and its handicapped elevator there on the left-hand picture, and the completed wall on the right-hand side. One of the biggest things that the students have asked is, why didn't you turn that display case into an aquarium instead? Not exactly practical, but I can see their point.
Okay, here you see the newly divided back room on the left-hand photo with the new wall at the far end, which houses our silent study zone. And on the other picture on the right, you see the framing for the study room and the offices in the back of the library. The next few slides are going to show the construction of the progress of the construction. The blue in the photo on the left is the new wainscoting that conceals the new electrical runs. There are now more than 2 plugs per wall, which made our students very, very happy. The walls with the wainscoting had drywall up to the ceiling as well. This would be much better for sound dampening than the cinder block walls we had before. A new acoustic ceiling was installed that would help control the noise level better than the original had. The first photo you see here shows the new study rooms with their large windows. And in this photo on the right, you see the fancy round lights that you see in the ceiling over the stairs that set our timeline back over 6 weeks, as they were on back order from Europe.
Ultimately, both Suzanne and I were in on the paint and carpet selection. With input from an interior designer, we decided that the majority of the walls and carpet would be neutral colors, such as tan and cream, with purple and turquoise acting as accent colors for the wall and floor. Here you can see the carpet that goes around, almost like a raceway, around the outside of the building and into the interior of our study room, as you can see in the right. All in all, the total renovation from top to bottom, inside and out, ran from January 2015 through September of 2016. Not only did we end up with a tornado shelter, we also had a functional, well-lit 21st century library. I'll show you more views of the interior, but first I want to tell you about the move back.
Okay, so once the building was ready, we had to move back, and we started packing books in May as soon as finals were over. Everything possible was packed and boxed by the end of May so that we could have time in June for vacations. No leave time would be granted from July until after the classes started, as all hands would be needed for the move and for the setup after the move. Week by week, the move was pushed further back by construction delays. Ultimately, we moved in early September, and during that move, we kept the temporary library space over in the Vera Low building open so that students could still print and use the computers. So here you see a picture of how we moved our books. The smaller collections, like the juvenile books and the permanent reserves, were loaded onto book carts, and then the carts themselves were shrink wrapped. The main collection was removed shelf by shelf and wrapped individually. The shelves were then stacked about 4 or 5 high and wrapped all together. We did have some issues after the move with some of these sets collapsing on themselves, but it didn't really pose any big problem. Everything else was boxed and tagged with its new location.
Now, moving back required the help of many different groups. From moving to cleaning to setting up new furniture, it took a large group effort. A large majority of this was done strictly by library staff. We had 4 full-time people and 1 part-time person. And during this time, we were having to keep the library in Velo open normal working hours. So somebody had to be over there from 7:30 a.m. until midnight. And that effectively took 1 person out of the mix of moving. We also had a few friends and some family that graciously donated time as well. Now, we have no photos of the move itself. We were too busy, and frankly, we were too tired to think of taking pictures. Moving the materials from the temporary library was the least of the problems. Remember that I told you things were stored in a barn? We had fun with that, as you can see from the slide. Also, because the library items were mixed with items from downstairs, everything was moved back as a group. We had to spend a lot of time just figuring out what was ours and what wasn't, and then spent more time trying to get the stuff that wasn't ours moved downstairs and out of our way. Finally, in November of this past year, we took a half day and closed the library down so that they could fumigate to get rid of the rest of the creatures like you see over in the lower right-hand corner, because they were everywhere. Okay. So after about a month of bruises and sweat and injuries, everything was set up and the library was finally ready to open. Okay, so these photos that you see here show the study tables along the outside wall of the library, and the photo on the right shows the inside of one of our large study rooms. Here you see the circulation desk on the left, and the back wall of the library, which is where all the study rooms are located. This is a photo on the left here of the atrium, which is in the front of the library. And the other photo shows the entrance as you come into the library. Now, just a couple of words about that artwork you see hanging on the wall on the left. I had come up with this concept for design and really wanted to get it done before homecoming in October. So I had some discussions with our art department, and several of their students came up with this for us. And that's nothing more than a canvas drop cloth. It took a couple of gallons of gesso and a couple of gallons of paint, and we ended up with this sign. Didn't quite do what I thought it was going to do, but it works. Okay, here's another picture of the view of the staircase on the left. And on the right, you see what we use as our art room, which is where we have our poster printer and the laminator, and where we can do book projects and art projects and book repairs. We ran an informal survey the first few weeks we were open, and a more formal survey at the end of the semester. Responses were generally positive. I learned a lot of new slang that I wasn't aware of, and I'm still not sure what some of it means, but students assured me they were all positive comments. I guess the biggest success we have had has been with these group study rooms. The students are really appreciative of those. The library was open for business completely and totally by October of 2016, and the university held a small rededication ceremony in November. All in all, I'm fairly satisfied with what we have gotten done. Would dearly love to have some new furniture to add to this. Don't see that happening for a while. But it is all workable, and the students and the faculty are pleased. Thank you for your attention. Are there any questions?
At this point, folks, if you want to unmute yourself to ask questions, or you can ask the questions in the chat box. It's totally up to you.